afternoon. Thank you. We'd like to welcome you all at the Port Authority Bus Terminal. And my name is Myron Johnson. My role here is actually to bring cultural development and entertainment here at the bus terminal. We're so excited here today for this art exhibition and truly excited for the description that you laid out, Sean, about from the feet up. And if anybody knows anything about hip hop, well, you know that it originated and most of it started right here. A lot of footsteps came through this bus terminal. So one of the things I want to do is really I want to acknowledge one of the main people who actually is part of the Port Authority, and that's Rudy King. Rudy King is our media and public relations, and I don't do anything without him. And he vet this out, and he worked hard with Sean and all of us to bring this to life, okay? So with further ado, I want to introduce Sean Williams.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. How we doing? All right, so I'm Sean Williams of Obsessive Sneaker Disorder. And first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here today. This was actually a project that got started in August of 2018, when I walked through this Port Authority bus terminal, just like so many of us do. And I saw exhibit space. And automatically, my mind started racing to the point where I said, wait a minute. Let me give a call to my buddy D and see what he thinks about us doing what we always do, which is we do traveling sneaker exhibits. You know, it started with what we did with the Rise of Sneaker Culture exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum, working on the curation team with that. And then our heads, wherever we go, we always think about where we can use sneakers as a lens to tell really great stories. So when I saw, and to my surprise, as so many people are, when they see that there is now art exhibit space in the Port Authority bus terminal, automatically it put me in a mind space of creativity and storytelling. So I reached out to that gentleman who just introduced me, Mr. Myron Johnson. So he's the visionary mind that we got to thank also. Let's have a round of applause for Mr. Myron Johnson. But he's right. The Port Authority bus terminal has an unsung story to be told, which is for those of us who are born and raised in New York, like this esteemed panel here of people who are real, genuine New Yorkers who have traveled quite a few footsteps through the Port Authority bus terminal. For those of us who were born and raised in the hip-hop generation, the rise of the 70s, the 80s, and we traveled out, a lot of times we went through the Port Authority bus terminal and took our style and our flair with us. And then for those of us who knew what was going on here, there were a lot of people who came through the Port Authority bus terminal and came to New York to experience the energy of all that was being created. So it was important for me to just initiate that and have that conversation with Myron, who was open to it. And then, as you'll hear from this panel of, my esteemed friends and colleagues, these are some very creative and very masterful storytellers and people who have contributed a lot to New York's history in terms of creativity and hip hop and fashion and just genuine New Yorkers. There are genuine New Yorkers up here on this panel, and it emanates in them everywhere they go. So I'll pass the mic down and allow everybody to introduce themselves and tell a little bit of their story. And then we're going to get into the conversation to put the exhibit within the context that you guys can see why it's here. So I'll start down that way, sir. Always say ladies first. Yes, ladies first. Forgive my manners.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Right. Hello, and thank you for having me today. My name is April Walker, and I am a trailblazer of urban fashion, streetwear. I started a brand called Walkerwear, but prior to that, I started Fashion in Effect, which was a custom shop in Brooklyn. And from that, I started Walkerwear. From that, I became a serial entrepreneur. I do something called Walker Gyms, which is about igniting the spirit of entrepreneurship and creativity within humans, because I think we all have creativity. But I do books, I do educational webinars, I do work within with young people in our school system and our education system to help them to think creatively and to think of themselves as their own brand. I actually work with Milk D next to us. We do a music and fashion class together. I'll let him talk more about that. But I just love creating and working and collaborating with dope people.
Oh, yeah. Icon. Walkaway. I'm Milk D from Audio 2, aka Milk is Chillin'. I'm a artist, producer, educator, thanks to April. And thanks for having me.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is D. Wells, part of the Voltron team, as I call it, with Sean Williams. And so many of these people on this panel. It's so amazing to see us all here because of hip hop and fashion and sneakers. I was standing, taking in the exhibit and thinking that, look at this, here we are because of leather and rubber in Port Authority. As a kid who grew up, I'm not originally from New York, but don't hold that against me, from the US Virgin Islands, but did spend a lot of time in New York City, in the Bronx, in Brooklyn. It's amazing to be here and all of you to be able to take this in and tell your story, because I always say one of the most important things we have to do as human beings is we have to tell our stories. No one tells our story better than us. And now in this day and age, because of technology and social media, we're able to tell these stories. But more importantly, thank you to Port Authority, the great staff and the team that gave us the opportunity to present this and to let others take it all in and share with it, because I'm sure as thousands, if not millions of people who walk through, these hallways are going to take it in. They're going to take pictures. They're going to share stories, and hopefully they tag Port Authority, but reconnect with some things that are classic to them, that are important. Maybe it's a childhood memory. Maybe it's something that you really wanted, a pair of sneakers or a t-shirt. I was telling a story about a 98.7 Kiss FM t-shirt that I really wanted and I could never get, but I did get it because of my cousin won it and sent it to me in the Virgin Islands, go figure, along with cassette tapes. Yeah, exactly. I really wanted that t-shirt. So thank you for being here this afternoon, and more importantly, hearing our stories, and then also reconnecting afterwards as well to share some of your stories of why this exhibit is important to you. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cole Rodriguez. I want to thank first and foremost Myron Johnson, Rudy King, and the good people at the Port Authority for giving us a platform today. This is about real hip hop culture today. Hip hop back in the days, we had a mantra, and that mantra was peace, love, unity, and having fun. And that's what this exhibition represents. I think in an era of like mumble rap and mass shootings and political divide, I think these kind of functions bring people together in a good way so that we can share something special with the world. So when I think of the Port Authority, I think of the world. I don't think of New York, because we are at the crossroads of the world in Times Square. So this show is for the world, not just the birthplace of hip hop, but for the world. And I'm honored to be doing this on such hallowed grounds. I came through these halls when I was a kid, and I remember that was the old New York. It was rough back then. So to come back here, revisit it on such a positive note with this esteemed group of individuals, I think that's a blessing. And I want to thank you guys for having us and allowing us to tell our story, because at the end of the day, I'm a storyteller. I came into hip hop as a graffiti writer, and through the years, I've managed to become a curator of all things urban culture. I started a clothing line called 1,000 Words, and we're the only brand that you can get a Latin Quarter t-shirt or a Kiss FM t-shirt, or a lot of those iconic images and iconography that we grew up with in New York or in the tri-state area. So I'm happy to share that with the world, as we have been doing with our brand, and more importantly, share a lot of love and peace by way of these good people and all those great artifacts that you see in that window upstairs. So thank you for having us, guys. We really appreciate it.
My name is Blake, but I'm better known as Keo or Lord Scotch 79. I was a graffiti writer, so we have a lot of names. And I grew up in Brooklyn, but I've lived in every borough. And in addition to writing graffiti, I used to rhyme, and we were like Renaissance b-boys, I call it. We did everything. So only thing I didn't do was DJ because I couldn't afford turntables, but the dance. I got 8 days on. Okay, thank you, Tone. This is my idol right here, Tony Tone, the Cold Crush Brothers. That's who we grew up listening to, wanting to be like. So I used to stay right over here in Covenant House, under 21. So I used to battle MCs right in this Port Authority and run around Midtown. So it's a real honor to be back here. Today I'm widely known as a graphic artist, designer, creative director, so on and so forth. Done many album covers, book jackets, videos, feature-length films. And I'm also a New York Times best-selling author now, and I'm working, thank you. And I'm currently in production with my own adult animated cartoon, so you'll be seeing that shortly on your TV screen, coming to you live. But I'm happy to be here, and I want to thank the Port Authority for hosting us, and I really want to thank Sean and Cole for putting this thing together, and all my esteemed panelists. Milk is chilling.
How y'all doing out there? I'm Angelo King. I'm gonna let that out right now. My name is Angelo King. Coming through the Port Authority, getting on the trailway, going down to North Carolina to work in tobacco fields at a young age. Coming through here as a graffiti writer, chain 2, and now coming through here as DJ Tony Tone, aka DJ Tony Crush of the legendary Cold Crush Brothers. I'm Bronx born, raised, been in hip hop since 1975, and I'm still in hip hop. I'm living it every day, and I'll be 60 in 2 weeks. So I'm in 3 museums, the Smithsonian being the last one, and I appreciate having my picture here on 42nd Street in the Port Authority. And when he called me, I said, yeah, I gotta come. I'm there because that's New York, and I'm every bit of New York. So I'm here to share whatever. Peace, love.
So you got an intro of everyone up on the panel. We're also going to lay out a little bit of what everybody's role was with the exhibit. First, I'm starting with directly to my right, because I haven't known Mr. James Cole Rodriguez that long, but just in the short amount of time that I've known him and have heard of him for a while, I got to see firsthand in creating this exhibit that he is indeed a master storyteller and curator. And I just want you to talk a little bit, Cole, before we pass down the line, about what your mindset was that you used to approach us putting this together.
Well, again, I'm a storyteller at the end of the day. Back in the days, I did it through graffiti. I'm a serial entrepreneur, much like April is. And one of my first businesses was a T-shirt business. Actually, one of the gentlemen out there was one of my partners back in the day. Shout out to Ray Sambo. So I have a history of fashion and being creative. And when I did 1,000 Words, I did it actually because I wanted to honor a lot of the people that I grew up admiring back in the days. The graffiti writers, the B-boys, everyone that created a face for hip hop culture. A lot of the images that you see hanging up there are by Joe Conzo, Jamel Shabazz, Henry Chalfant, and Ernie Panicoli. These individuals single-handedly created the visual soundtrack for hip hop culture. Martha Cooper, I'd be remiss not to mention Martha Cooper, whose classic Dondi image Sean is wearing. That's one of our T-shirts. So when I started the brand, it was really to preserve the great culture of hip hop and also share it with the newer generation, kids that are coming up these days, whose point of reference is Biggie and Tupac. And it's, no diss, but hip hop started 20 years before that. So one of the things was to educate, individuals globally by way of using T-shirts as a platform. So that's really what we're doing these days. ATW is a curatorial brand. And when Sean approached me a year ago to be a part of this thing, I jumped at it because, I think it's important to share this great history with the world again, not just New York, and just remind people of the beauty visually of our culture. I think it gets swept under the rug sometimes. So that's why you see those awesome photos of Tony and the rest of the gang. That image that's hanging up is actually a still from the movie Wild Style, the shot of Tony Tone looking at the camera with the short shorts. So, yeah.
He said that's chasing the short shorts.
Yeah, so that's an iconic image that was shot on the set of the film Wild Style. So all of those images have a great New York history. And again, we wanted to share them with the world, not just the sneakers, but how they tie into the visuals as well. So I couldn't have been more pleased to get down with this. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, bro. Thank you. This question, we're gonna shoot down to the right there to Milk for a second. So, you have just a little bit of education for folks here. You have one of the most sampled records in hip hop history.
The most sampled hip hop record in hip hop history.
So, chances are a lot of travelers who have come through here to or fro at some point on their Iowa Walkman, their Sony Walkman, CD players, whatever, were bumping Milk is Chillin', or I Don't Care, or anything else from the FPM catalog as classic. So what's your thought process on from when music was created then to seeing where it is now, where we don't have to actually physically own music, but it's still so much a part of us when we're traveling and going places?
Okay, so first let me say that down there at Tony Tone, that I just did an interview and I was explaining to them what started me rhyming to begin with, and it was a mixtape, the Busy Bee, Kumo D battle tape, and Cold Crush Brothers. And when I heard that, that's what inspired me to start rapping. Thank you.
Well, that was our job.
It's crazy how technology changes things. There's a saying that says the same thing that'll make you laugh will make you cry. There's a lot of things about technology that takes us to a whole nother level, but it also changes some things that I think that we miss. One of the things that I miss is album covers and information. It's like, it's so hard to get the credits now, it's like everywhere. But, I used to leave cut school and come up here to the record store to buy records, and I'd be on the train going home, to Run DMC, like looking at the credits.
Reading,
and the
checking the
artwork,
visuals.
And, you actually have it in your hand, you can feel it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know that. I miss that. But it's different, but it's still, and the good thing is that you can reach so many more people instantly. I remember when we first started our company, we used to have to mail out records, right? So every day I'm going to the post office with a stack of records. They used to hate to see me coming.
Yep.
And you send them out and it takes months before it starts picking up, so it was a hassle and it was costly. Now it's like, distribution instantly. So, and also with that comes the fact that in my opinion, it makes the music maybe a little more disposable because it's here, it's so much overabundance is here. But when you actually buy it and you have it and you live with it, in my opinion, it kind of lasts longer, exists,
Right. Right.
But anyway, what was the question?
No, you answered it. You answered
Okay.
it.
All right.
And I want to add to that just the importance of, within context of what Cole so masterfully did with bringing album covers out to the exhibit. So that talks right to the point that you just made. I don't think the way things are now we'll ever be able to do an exhibit like that with the current pace of how music is actually made, created, and distributed. So to answer that question again was to let everyone know, number one, you had the type of record that people wanted to hear over and over and over and all over the world. And people wanted to own it, and they had to own it in order to enjoy it, where now you don't have to physically own music. And when we were curating the exhibit, and Cole said, I'm getting album covers out. Well, I'm just gonna show out. I instantly thought two things. I thought, which for the people in the audience, you'll be able to experience this. We wanted to embrace the new way people consume music alongside making sure you showed appreciation for all the music of the past. So what do I mean when I say that? When you go up to the exhibit, and courtesy of the good brothers Gary and Ray of Dual Minds there's a QR code on the center panel of the exhibit where we created a curator's playlist. And you'll be able to scan the QR code and it'll take you to either Spotify or YouTube, where the playlist that we curated is there for you to listen to and enjoy. This is music that at one point was in a physical form. All of it was, and you had to have it in a physical form that now through technology, you can just simply scan and walk with. So the exhibit, with the expertise that Cole put in making sure that the records were displayed, was the kind of thing that we wanted to remind people that there was a time when you had to physically own and possess and be one with the music. This is an important piece of the story to tell. So my next question is for April. So April, as the fashion icon you are and the traveler you are, we know you travel all over the place now. One of the things that we also think about when we travel is style and comfort. So when you were traveling through here or anywhere else back in the days, how important was your style and style versus comfort?
For me, is key, right? So there are different stages. Right now, it's more about comfort. But when I was 20, rolling through here, it was all about style, right? So there are different stages. When I was 20 years old and younger than that, as a teenager, it was Kung Fu days over here. You know what I mean? On Sundays for me. So, but it was always, when I was taking pictures on the backdrop on 42nd Street, right down the block after the movies on a Friday or Saturday night, you never knew who you were going to see. So you always wanted your fashion game and your footwear game to be tight. So that was growing up, Now, as I've evolved and I travel so much, my feet don't work like they did 30 years ago. So comfort is really first, and then I'm figuring out style from the comfort lens. Whereas before it was style over comfort. Now my feet say so it's changed. But I think it's key. We live in New York. We live in a melting pot of so it's the only place in the world, not the only, because I've seen some other places, but it's the biggest place to me out of everywhere as a melting pot where you go down the street and you can see 100 different looks. And it's not like they stick out, right? It's just part of New York culture. And that's the special thing about New York. And Port Authority is the hub for that because it's the intersection of so many cultures, so many people, it covers the gamut of people walking through, traveling to different points. And you see the style, and it's all different. That's the beauty of it.
So my next question is to my left, Keo first, then Tone. Creatively speaking, as a creative director, Keo, as you absorb the energy of this neighborhood now, knowing what it was from back in the days and seeing what it is now, how does that translate to you creatively and just even as a New Yorker?
Hello.
You-
The energy currently,
Yeah.
see, to me, you know, a lot of people like to reminisce about the old New York and complain about how things have changed. And I can be guilty of that, sounding like a sour old man. And then I have to recall that when I was coming up, cats were telling me about the good old days before the Dodgers left Brooklyn. So New York is always in a state of flux, and change is the only thing that's constant, right?
Yeah.
And right here is probably the most visible concentration of that, where you see the coming and going,
Mm-hmm.
right? And New York has always been the home for immigrants from all over the world, whether folks were migrating from down south to get jobs in the Navy Yard during World War II, or they were escaping persecution in Europe, or today we have influxes of South America, Central America, Asia, everywhere. New York is the stop for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be Ellis Island. That's a museum now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So right here is, you can actually witness within a week, just if you put a time lapse camera, shops opening and closing. It's that quick, and new styles coming and going. And Midtown was always that. You know, in Brooklyn as young kids, we would go to the Deuce. Even when we were too young to travel together, to travel alone, we would go in a group with older cats just to get the vibe of what was going on in New York. You'd see the latest styles. There were clothing shops all around here. 8th Avenue, Mr. Joe's, 2 for 1, Clark Wallabies, right?
Yeah.
The record stores were here, okay? Downstairs Records was in the subway station.
Yeah.
And you could get the latest things that you might not find on Fulton Street in Brooklyn. They hadn't reached that far yet. So it's like a little ripple effect, you understand?
Yeah.
And as far as sneaker culture, which is what this show is really about at its heart, because it's from the feet up, right?
Yes,
and that's
sir.
how we always dressed. You say, oh, I'm wearing these today. What matches that, right? To this day, I do that. I grab this hat because it happened to be the same shade as the shoe. It never works the other way around, right? So here is where we saw cats from other boroughs that were coming with their own flavor, because now people in Japan wear the same style that I'm wearing today. Because of the internet, it's become a very small world, and culture travels quickly. I can click online and see what people down south are doing, what people in LA are doing. But back then, I could tell what neighborhood you were from by the way that you laced your shoes, by the, So they talk about lifestyle sneakers now. That's a category.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I know, we invented that because every shoe was a technical athletic shoe for
Yeah.
a specific purpose.
Absolutely.
Now, you got to understand, most of us were poor kids. I know I was. I can't speak for anyone else. I had one pair of church shoes, hard bottom, which were beat up.
Yep.
But I could get some new athletic shoes for school.
Yep.
Because I was trying to make the team that year, right? So the best pair of shoes you had, the newest, cleanest shoe, was a sneaker. And that you took that basketball shoe or that tennis shoe or that running shoe and you brought it out into the street and used it for dance or writing graffiti, or this one's good for skateboard. See, now there's whole divisions of these brands devoted to skate, lifestyle.
Yes, sir.
But prior to hip hop, nobody wore a sneaker to dance in. The whole reason hip hop began to catch on with the youth was because we couldn't get into the club. We didn't have the disco was becoming increasingly a rich thing. You had to have cocaine and a white suit, and you understand Studio 54 days.
Yeah.
So we would come here to this neighborhood to get inspired, and I can still do that because I come from the days when cats would wear tailor-made, they call them AJs or overlaps or gabardines with the pleat, right?
Gabardines.
And a silk shirt and an alpaca sweater with canvas Pro-Keds on, and were fly, and kept a toothbrush in your back pocket to make sure your sneakers didn't get scuffed. So,
in case of emergency.
right. So the dances evolved around, you had Puma Clydes, right? There was a certain style you could do in that you couldn't do in a canvas Chuck Taylor or a Pro-Ked. So these German shoes began coming here, Adidas and Puma, technological innovations, and they were basketball shoes, but we utilized them for other things. Graffiti writers, we needed a comfortable shoe with the ankle support, you know? We were running around elevated subway tracks and 30 feet above the concrete, you know, skipping across. Mm-hmm. If you slipped, you were done, right? Yeah. So it was about taking something like the turntable was designed for one purpose. These cats took it and made it a musical instrument. They utilized it for something that the cats who designed it never had in mind, right? Oh, you're not supposed to do that. You're going to destroy my good record player, right? Now it's worldwide accepted. In fact, they now design tables for that and hire people like this to consult with them.
Yeah.
Right? So pretty much. So this is a place where you can come and steal some ideas or catch a vibe and maybe add on and bring your own.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, somebody else will steal yours. So I'm going to pass the mic, though, because I talk too much.
Thank you, Keo. Thank you. And just for full disclosure, before I ask this question to Tone, Keo is also one of the co-creators of this exhibit. And one of the things that he made clear to me when talking to me about doing this exhibit was making sure that there was a lasting effect past when we take this down. And, you know, there was an incredible energy that went into doing this exhibit. And in its physical form, where you're going to see it, it's a great thing that Keo said to me, we need to make sure that that has legs and has some extensions to it where people who can't get here can really get to see this story in a medium and in a way that it'll last a while. So, you know, the other features of this exhibit that you'll see, like the Spotify playlist, and we'll also have a virtual tour via Instagram page specifically created to take people on a virtual tour of the exhibit. All of that was inspired by Keo. So thank you, brother. Last but definitely not least, you are also immortalized in the exhibit Tone, first of all, we have to make sure that I would like for everyone to please join me in giving this man a round of applause for all his years of service to us. So, Tone, it's been a lot of years where I've talked with you and I listened to you, and I hear stories, and I also hear you imparting the wisdom on me based on those stories. So when it was time to put this exhibit together, a lot of those stories stayed in my head in terms of making sure that it's told from the right perspective with the right broad scope and curated very well because of all the times that you shared with me where the story was told incorrectly. How important is it to you, even today, to see things that are in regard to showcasing and talking about our culture done correctly?
It's like, you have a kid, you want the kid to grow up and everything be top notch. Everybody love the kid. You don't want nobody to hate your kid. So
Right.
this is the same thing when it comes to the culture of hip hop. I remember PF flyers, we used to call them skips. And we used to look at the older guys that wore shell toes, high top shell toes, not the low tops, high top shell toes. It was either shell toes or Coach Converse at the time. And Pro Kids, 69s. And you had to like beg my mother constantly. And she finally said, okay. And we went to Buster Brown's. If anybody know Buster Brown's, we went to Buster Brown's. And I had my mind set on getting a pair of 69s. But when I walked in Buster Brown, they had red, black, and green Pro Kids. And I said, I guess I'm a little militant because I picked the red, black, and green. But I went to school that first week and somebody broke in my locker and stole them. So my mother said, well, I'm not buying you another pair. So I felt Jim for the next 2 years because I couldn't go back to Skips. So I wore shoes and I felt Jim for the next 2 years. I wasn't having it. So the next pair of sneakers I got was shell toes, high top. And I put my feet in them and I never put the laces in them. And I wore them without laces. I don't know if that's where Rudnam got it from, but I never wore laces. And today I got laces in the left one, but not the right one. So, but we went through the whole thing of, you lacing them up, making sure that the laces are even. Every time you put them in, you got to pull it tight and then loosen it back up. And then we tried different designs, how to put the laces in, like put them down the left side and then come around to the right and come back up, going back. And it's just, yeah, all that. We tried all that. I was a kid that I never even put my belt buckle in the front. It's always been to the side or the back. So I might have been, fashion, whatever. I see pictures of myself and don't even realize that's me. Because, I've been through so many changes. I was doing video for the executioners, and the director is like, yo, can you stand like this? I'm looking, and one of the executioners say, yeah, that's him. He can stand like that's him. And I'm like, oh, that is me. But it was, I've been around. So, it's like, hip hop, the whole thing about hip hop is sharing. I got knowledge or whatever, I want to pass it down the line. I don't want to just keep it to myself. I come up, Cool Herc, African Bambaataa, Grandmaster Flash, Breakout, Cold Crush. I come right in that line And, we built this thing and we call it universal. And that's what it's supposed to be, universal for all people. When Herc put on the record, he didn't say, yo, this is a white person in a Puerto Rican. He just played it. Because music is for everybody, and that's just like hip hop culture. I was a graffiti writer. I wasn't really got up, but it was like a drug. I had to detox graffiti out of my mother sent me down south. Like, yo, you gotta, I was fiending. This whole thing, is really real for a lot of us,
Last but certainly not least, Mr. D. Wells. Coming up as a kid in the U.S. Virgin Islands and then coming up to visit Brooklyn and travel around to the Bronx and everywhere else. You still walk with a lot of those stories and you still share a lot of those stories. And a lot of that goes into how we conduct our business. So I want you to talk a little bit about your mindset and your sensibilities when it's time for us to do things like these curated exhibits and using sneakers as that lens.
I shared this story earlier about watching my parents play tennis at the then College of the Virgin Islands. It's now University of the Virgin Islands in St. Thomas. And it was them wearing Rod Lavers and Stan Smiths. And that's where it began for me. And I can literally say that's where the obsession began, by watching them play tennis. They were actually using the sneakers for the intended purpose, to play the game of tennis. In the Caribbean, in the US territory, that even to this day, I was actually just there a week ago, and sneakers are important there as even the islands are rebuilding from Hurricanes Irma and Maria. Here we are, June 3rd, hurricane season just officially began June 1st. And we're hoping and praying nothing happens once again for any of the Caribbean islands, for DR, Puerto Rico, St. Martin, St. Kitts, and that's something that I'm very mindful of. But I'm mindful of it because also how important sneakers and fashion. I grew up at a time when my connection to fashion was through television. I will never forget getting cable television and being able to see stateside programs from Chicago, from New York, and then eventually traveling to New York and then traveling to Chicago. Video Music Box. I was flabbergasted. I was stuck. I was tuned in, plugged in, whatever you want to call it. 40 Deuce. I begged my aunt and uncle, Aunt Claire, to bring me down here. She didn't want to, but I persisted. I begged and pleaded and got to experience it. 125th Street, Harlem. I was digesting fashion and culture and music all the way in the Caribbean through television. And eventually when I was able to travel and be here and absorb it and live it and breathe it and hear it, it became real tangible for me. So getting dressed from the feet up and how important that is to this day is something that I do. I mean, it may have taken me probably about 2 hours last night to figure out what sneakers I was gonna wear today. And I decided to wear Clark Kent Black Friday Air Force Ones. Why? I don't know, I found them. And I was like, oh, I haven't worn these in like 4 years. See, there you go. Okay, and see, and Clark Kent, people will hear his name and know him now through sneakers, but his, kind of claim to fame is music.
Yeah.
It is culture. It is not just hip hop, it's music as a whole, because he's produced albums for countless artists. So to kind of bring it all back, here we are sitting in, at this panel with this amount of history, for me is profound. I'm like a kid in a candy store because this is Christmas for me. We're living and breathing it every day. We're talking about sneakers. We're talking about hip hop. We're talking about fashion. We're talking about life. All of us, like I said in the beginning, is we're all connected. You know, we talk more and more. We realize we have more in common than not. We are human beings. That means we are able to do. We're able to love. We're able to share stories. And here we are talking about just that. Fashion, hip hop, culture, life. Yep. We're living and breathing each and every day. So today we're better than we were yesterday. Tomorrow, hopefully, we'll be better. Whatever we're dealing with, you know, as people go and share and take in this exhibit, I hope they take a bit of, you know, they're impacted by it, more importantly. So they go home and maybe tell, you know, their son, their daughter, their nephew, niece about what it was like for them to see this. You know, I think about, I mean, I can go on and on for hours, so I'll cut there.
Thank you, D. Thank you. That was profound. Absolutely. So we're going to take a couple of questions, not too many. If anyone has any questions, will we be able to pass this mic out for people to ask a couple of questions, and then we'll keep one up here for anyone that has questions. And then for those who haven't seen it yet, it'll be time to head upstairs and see the exhibit, but not before, what's that? Absolutely, April.
So let me just say two things. I'd be remiss not to mention that when I mentioned I had a book coming out, this is the producer of the audio book, Milk D. And so I'm really grateful that I've known him for talking about how hip hop is full circle. I started my first shop in 1987, and Milk gave me the opportunity to do his cover. And that's how that relationship started. I think it was like 88, maybe. And we're still friends, and he just produced my audio book. So big up to hip hop. The book is called Get Your Ass Off the Couch.
It's a good book.
Yes, it is.
And it's Walker Gems, and it's great. But the second part of it is, as you guys are talking about sneakers, and we were talking about how the function of sneakers and hip hop, etc. What's interesting to me is you see the intersection of all this travel and all these people converging and all the kicks that are coming through here now. We really, as hip hop, paved the way for that in the sense of kicks were always about function, but I'm talking from a fashion standpoint now. Hip hop was about just doing it a little different and being the opposite of what it was supposed to be. And we would take the Cortez or whatever that sneaker was, and we were like, yeah, I know it's for this. Like Rod Lavers were my favorite. Like, but I wasn't playing tennis, but we would have tennis outfits and be in the streets or in Latin quarters with the Rod Lavers or whatever it was. You know, I might wear Rod Lavers with a basketball jersey. You know what I mean? It was just like, it was owning it, whatever it was, and we were in these streets. And we were taking pictures, and if any of you have seen Jamel Shabazz's photos, you know that it wasn't about the sports game, but we made fashion, the sports of the footwear, we made it fashionable. So I have to mention that.
Yes, indeed.
I got one.
Go ahead.
Listening, it just made me remember how we used to iron our shoelaces. Right? Remember that? You have to iron them and match them to the shirts.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
Those laces are on.
Yeah, we got a nice tribute to you upstairs. So if anyone have any questions really quickly before we all go upstairs, don't be shy. I know there's a lot of knowledge imparted here, but I know we have questions. My man Kyle.
1 second.
So what's the evolution of this? This is I think great in terms of how you guys have come together and kind of told your story. But what's next?
Honestly, is in my mind, and I can't speak for everybody here. I think that's, definitely we have to form Voltron and see what's next, is to make sure that the story is told in different geographies, in different places. just as genuine and as authentic and as sincere as is told here. That's really important because, again, everybody up here, this panel up here, I did not take lightly, having the conversations with everybody up here about being involved with this. And it's because of the lessons of what was taught to me about the integrity that needs to go into storytelling and curating and making sure that the right elements exist so that things speak without you having to speak, And, one of the conversations I had with Keo, he was like, yo, we got to treat this like if no one's around to talk about it or hear it from the horse's mouth, how are they going to be able to use all the mediums of technology and information we have now to get the message just as real and authentic? And that resonated a great deal with me, So geography is mapping it out and seeing where the potential lies for us to tell a story again somewhere else. But until we are able to do that, again, what we did was embrace technology and get people where they're at. Just about everybody that walks through here has their smartphone on them. So, for example, with the curated playlist, being able to scan those QR codes for YouTube and Spotify and be able to get into the sense of collaboration that we all put together to create that playlist, which Top Billing was just added the other day, by the way. And then the virtual tour for people who can't be here. We set up an Instagram page, and it's tour_FTFU, where we actually set up a virtual tour of the exhibit laid out exactly as it is here for you to see it and experience it through that social media lens of the box and then swipe and everything else that really, in all essence, it takes away from storytelling, doing all of that. But we've tried to meet people where they're at to give them as much of the authentic experience as we possibly can.
I just wanted to answer your question really quick. I think what's next is for you good people to continue to share the story. You know what I mean? For so long, our story has been told by other people. And this is the first time that we get to do it as a collective and tell it from our perspective, from our lens. If you walk away with anything today, just know that every article that's in that case that you guys are about to see, it represents someone's blood, sweat, and years. From April's t-shirt to those photographs hanging up on the wall to those fat laces that are hanging on that clothing line. Those are my laces that I've had since the 80s. Those were laces that I might have been running from the cops in, or, just chilling out, maybe on 40 Deuce catching flicks. So everything in that case represents a piece of who we are. And that's very special to us. So we ask that you guys continue that dialogue and share it with people. Post it to your social media. And let's continue to inform and educate by way of all this greatness that we have here today.
What's the hashtags people should use?
So the hashtags people should use if you're posting on social media are, you want ATW brand or ATW brand, OSD LIVE, OSD Live, PABT Arts. Those three are the most important ones right there. ATW brand, ATW BRAND, OSD Live, OSD LIVE, and PABT Arts. They'll be posted eventually, yep. They will be posted, yep. Anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, kind of answering his question, what I think should be next, since you said Voltron, has to be a museum, a sneaker museum. Like, it's logical whether you start it as a pop-up and you carry it forward that way. And I want to commend you, everyone that I listened to, because in the telling of history, something that you did that I don't know if you know you did, you didn't denigrate today. And a lot of us have stories, but today won't listen to us because we knock what they do and we don't accept the fact that they did like you did, just have change.
Mhm.
And so I want to commend, I want y'all to keep going down that road.
Thank you.
Because
Thank you,
then they
brother.
listen to you when you say that. Now, the question that I want to ask is, I come up like when you came up. I remember when cons was $7.99 and $7.99 was $100. And then the next, and it's always been status. Then Pro Keds came after cons and they were $9.99. And then Pumas came and they were $14.99. And each time we were, like you said, we didn't know we were poor. You didn't know that till you got some money later.
Yeah.
But we didn't know we were poor. We played basketball in our shoes. So I came up I'm trying to figure out, when did sneakers get so hot? Because I aspired to Gators. I got my first pair of Gators in the 9th grade, and that was $700. And now I'm looking at people spending $700 for sneakers at $1,500, and I'm trying to figure out, when exactly, is there a time point that I missed that all of a sudden sneakers just became what they came now?
Well, like I said, I'll be 60 and I ain't never had a pair of Gators. So, I ain't never had a pair of Gators.
Well, look, I still wear the furs and everything, so
Hey,
I'm still
listen.
stuck back. But I can't figure it out.
I had marshmallow shoes. I had the rips. I had, we used to have the permanent crease in our jeans. We used to sew the crease in.
Wait a minute, you out of order. We supposed to act like marshmallows never existed.
Nah.
You straight out
See,
of order.
You had the wrong marshmallows. I had the right marshmallows. See, because we used to get in Herc party. When you going up in Herc party, we used to put our black socks over our sneakers to get into the party. So we did all that. We used to wear a whole can of starch out on our jeans. We used to, you frizz out the bottom, you cuff it, and you iron it, so it just hit the sneaker. It just hit the sneaker. So, we went through some things. But September, I'm trying to do a sneaker jam in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I got this room, might hold 1,000 people. I'm trying to do a sneaker jam and with vendors and everything. I'm also trying to do a piece in the street movement, the stop movement, to get to this negative stuff about the gangs and stuff up in Bridgeport, because they killing these kids every day. So, hip hop is about understanding what you got to do and do it, not talking about it, just do it. So, Africa Bambaataa, Kool Herc, and all of them, the elements of hip hop, the fifth element is knowledge. So, we still, if you ain't teaching, you ain't doing hip hop.
I want to address that question real quick because in my experience, what I saw, and other people might have had a different perspective, but we used to take relatively inexpensive clothing, Lee jeans, so forth, and customize them. It was how you rocked it that made it fly. It was not how much it cost, right? So he talked about switching out the laces. Graffiti writers were some of the first to begin customizing and coloring. You get the white on white and make it purple stripes on white leather, because now you can buy sneakers in every imaginable material, color, and that didn't exist. It was navy blue, red, black, or white. And if you found the green, you had to travel to find. Oh, money green, where they got those at? Go all the way to the Bronx to find those, right? So what I saw happen, and it broke my heart, is when they flooded the neighborhoods with cocaine under Ronald Reagan and George Bush, people began to think that graffiti, breakdance, and all that was corny. They say, you still doing that? We getting money. It was called the me generation. It became very selfish. And all of a sudden, it was no longer about how fly you were, but how much money you spent. So the first shoe that cost more than first sneaker, because prior to that, it was Bally's. I used to get them for $90 in Albee Square Mall and get the gold and yellow suede ones, right? $90. That was a lot of money. If you had that, you were a cat of a certain status, right? The first sneaker to break $100 was a New Balance. And New Balance were never really fly in the streets like that. That was some New England, very kind of conservative shoe. But when drug dealers began to just want to flaunt how much loot they had, they walked in and looked at the price tag. Rather than the style or the color, they said, oh, I want that one. What's the most expensive shoe you got? Give me 3 of them. And all of a sudden it became about money and the peace, the love, the unity, all of that got lost. And that's what I hope. You said, how are we going to continue this thing? That when we tell the story, it's not just the fashion. So you got kids now, they want to look like Jean-Michel Basquiat or whatever. Certain things from the 80s are fashionable. But they don't really get the message that was in there. It's been lost, right? So there was a record that was big in Brooklyn called Love is the Message, right? Study your lessons. Okay, so that's the ultimate summertime jam. Now, somehow we've gotten away from that. It's a very divisive time. We're trying to build walls and separate people, and everybody's claiming something, some set or faction or partisan, right? And people are very angry. And we came out of a time that was racially divided, classes were divided, and hip hop attempted to unify all that. Anybody could be down. If you had skills, you had heart, you were about having fun, you weren't there to create a problem in the party, you were welcome, right? So I hope that message isn't lost when cats want to dress like the 80s or the 90s or whatever's retro thing is in fashion this week. Understand why hip-hop came about. Because we live on small islands. Unlike any other major city in the United States, where they live on this side of the tracks and you live on that side of the tracks and you never have to meet, here we were all jammed up together. So when the influx of Caribbean came over and Puerto Rican, and everybody brought their own little music and flavor and piece of the puzzle, we all lived on the same block and you heard each other's music blending. It sounded like a mega mix when you had the windows open in the summertime, right? Afro-Cuban, somebody's playing the drums, the rock and roll down the block, the disco, and you could hear the mix. And that's what the parties were about, everybody getting involved. And you see the colors of this panel? If I used to see a crew like that when I was a kid, we knew they were graffiti writers because those were the only dudes that hung out. You see 3 black guys, 2 Puerto Ricans, and a white boy. You say, yo, what you write? We knew they were graffiti writers. Now, a few years later, they might be a poppin' and lockin' or a breakdance crew. But originally, it was graffiti writers that began traveling to other neighborhoods because the train yards are in East New York or Morris Park, or neighborhoods where you might not could go by yourself. You might get chased out. But as a crew, that unity made us stronger. We were able to travel during a very, in the 60s going into the 70s, neighborhoods were still fighting to keep others out. And gangs looked like the blacks had one gang, the Puerto Ricans had another, the Italians had you know what I mean? And we were the first to move through neighborhoods, and they would give us a pass. Oh, they're just graffiti writers. They're not gang banging, So hip hop kind of helped to unite different cultures, classes, people from all walks of life, man. And I hope that it could continue to do that. Thank you.
I'm going to tell y'all 2 things. The first thing I tell y'all got to promise not to ask me who was it. Y'all promise? Well, I can't tell you then.
Who was it?
I can't tell you then. Okay, so it's a situation. I go to the Hevelo, Cool Herc party. I'm in the Hevelo, blah, blah, blah. I'm working in the record store. Herc ain't playing nothing I'm selling in the record store. Everything he's selling, he playing, I ain't never really heard it. I ain't heard it before. Okay, the next week, I go to another club. But this club, I gotta have hard bottom shoes on. I gotta be dressed to get in this club. So a DJ start cutting up break beats and people start break dancing. Another DJ stop the music, gets on the mic and say, yo, we don't do that here. If you want to do that, go down to Cool Herc party. That's where you belong. So that's where separation starts at. And that's what they want us to do. They want us to keep separating ourselves from each other, from nationalities and all that. That's what they want to do. But like I said, when Herc put on the record, Santana, Jay Gow's band, Bob James, he didn't yell out a nationality, he just played it. Second story. Some years, I started with the Brothers Disco, Funky 4+1, all that. I left them and started the Cold Crush Brothers. I meet Charlie. Charlie's a Puerto Rican. Charlie let his friends call me Cocolo, Moreno, all that. Disrespectful. But my thing was, I gotta make this work to bring our people together. Yeah. So I'm taking all this Coca-Cola and all this because it's like calling me the N-word. But I'm taking that to bring our cultures together, to bring our people together. Because Disco Wiz, DJ SWAT, all of them was Puerto Ricans. Or somewhat Latino. But Charlie had the skills to be recognized as the #1 Puerto Rican DJ. So I knew if I make this work, our people would come closer together. So I took because believe me, I wasn't a nice guy, but I said, this gotta work, this gotta work. So I took one for the team.
All right, we got time for one more question. One more.
My question's for April. So being a female in sort of like this sneaker world where there's a ratio of a lot of men here, what important was your perspective within creating this exhibition, and what flair did you add to it?
I think mine is from overall culture. I've always been into kicks, and the divide that you just talked about, I've never looked at it as women and men when it comes to kicks. It's fair game. So most of my kicks I used to wear a lot of men's kicks, and I still do because I don't necessarily want to wear a lot of pink kicks. You know what I mean? And there aren't enough choices. So considering that, it's very important that I'm sitting up here because not enough of us are represented. But I have one in the audience right now, Jody, rock star. We got a rock star here in the kick world right there. It's so many of us, but coming from menswear and being one of the only women in it, I'm used to it. So I'm going to show up every time to make sure we're represented.
Do we have time for one more?
It's a quick question. It's for April. When you worked with Big and Pac, did you approach them or they approached you?
Okay, so that was two stories were very different, but both times it was just synergy. So I had my first shop, Fashion in Effect, and it was in Brooklyn. And Biggie, I used to see all the time coming out the C train at Washington on Clinton and Washington. He would be with his little crew. And we just, what's up, kept moving because we lived in the same neighborhood. But I didn't really know him. It wasn't until I had Fashion in Effect and I used to do airbrush shirts, and I had an Eric B. and Rakim shirt in the window. And he came in one day, and that struck a conversation. That's how we became friends that became customers, and, built that relationship. With Tupac, I saw Tupac several times. I was at that time working with No Face. I don't know if you remember No Face, right? But I was doing a lot of styling for BWP and Mark Sex and a lot of those groups back then. This is back in the days. And Tupac was still a roadie in Digital Underground. And so I knew him from that because Mark Sex and they were all tight at Lover. And then Stretch, he hung out with Stretch, and I was cool with Stretch. So, and I remember one time when we were both trying out for Juice, we bumped into each other, and I had on like I wore one of my custom outfits. This is when I was doing Fashion in Effect still, and a lot of styling. He was like, "Oh, that's tight. Where'd you get that?" I made it. And then the second time was in Queens, and I was styling BWP on a shoot, and that's how I started that relationship. And when my homies call and all those videos, I started styling those.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you.
What's that?
That's it?
Go ahead, make your statement. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
All right, I want to give you all flowers because four of you are influential to me personally. Tony Tone as an MC, I'm whoever. It doesn't matter what I do. A little bit, but April, you're the first hip hop label. As in when I say clothing label, some people don't know that, but you're the original. Because I'm straight up New Yorker. Used to go to Latin Quarters as a kid at 13. You know what I mean? And Milk, I seen y'all perform as a kid. Walker, I'm from Queens, Brooklyn, the whole nine. Tony, I'm an MC. I'm down with the Executioners. I'm a DJ. I'm an MC. I'm NYC hip hop official. So everybody here, but four of you give me chills just being here. So I just wanted to give y'all flowers. It wasn't a question.
Thank you. Real quick, Tony.
Sweetheart, when it comes to women, we want women to be involved. We're not trying to keep y'all out. So, when that separation thing, you got to think about it before you put it out there because we're not trying to keep women out. We want women to be involved in everything. I'm Shyrock, the first female MC. I watched her start, grow, and I was just with her Saturday. They just named June 1st Shyrock Day. So, we want women to step up and not be afraid to show their whatever they got. I love women. Any man that don't want a woman around, I don't want him around. You understand me? So,
Tony Tone, never leaving the girls alone. There it is. All right, so the exhibit is technically not officially open yet until we finish here. But before we do that, I want to make sure two things, D. There's a couple of unsung heroes that didn't get a chance to get up here and say their piece in regard to this exhibit. Number one, or the 1-2 of it, I don't know if they're still here, but shout out to Gary Wallace and Ray Sambo of Dual Minds who did all the graphics and artistic direction for the exhibit. Stand up, y'all. Stand up, y'all. Come on, stand up, y'all. Stand up. And we got to thank our exhibit assistant, Miss Denise Mahoney. Please stand up, Denise. Thank you. And most importantly, to thank you also to the entire staff of the Port Authority Bus Terminal, but two gentlemen in particular, I would like for them to be front and center to get their flowers. Also, Mr. Myron Johnson and Rudy King. Please stand. Thank you, gentlemen. So the last thing, come on, y'all, round of applause for them. They made this happen. So the last thing we're gonna do before the exhibit is officially open. Yes. Not me. The last thing we're gonna do, we have one piece. Cole and I and Denise and everybody that came through, Gary, everybody that came through, we worked really hard on putting this exhibit to the place where it is for everybody to enjoy. But there's one piece missing that will be going in that makes the exhibit officially open for business. So Dee, would you please show people what that piece is that's going in today to make people officially open for business? The legendary First Priority Music Tee from Milk D's label. Thank you, Milk. Thank you to everybody here. Give yourselves a round of applause as well. We thank you guys for being here today. Gentlemen, anything you want to say to close out?
This is the actual authority. I'm not the authority. I am not the authority at all.
And I'm not the board.
I just wanted to say, on behalf of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, we welcome you here to the Port Authority bus terminal. This was very important for us to bring this to New York City to tell the real side of hip hop and sneakers and the culture through the Port Authority. And we really thank you for making this happen. Thank you.
So we're all about to head upstairs and ceremoniously induct the First Priority Music Tee in, and the exhibit is officially open for everyone's viewing until July 31st. But one of the things that Milk said, I want to make sure everybody does. One of the things that was important in the graphic design of the entire exhibit was, and Milk hit on this when he spoke, please read the credits. Please engage that centerpiece artwork for everything that we put there for you guys to enjoy. All right?
Alexa
Thank you.
does not know everything.
Thank you, everybody.